I never imagined that one evening could change my life completely. The Christmas lights were sparkling, music was playing softly in the background, and everyone seemed happy, but that night everything went wrong. I walked into the grand hall, wearing the red dress I had spent hours choosing, my hand resting gently on my belly. I was 6 months pregnant, expecting my first child, and I thought I would be greeted with smiles, congratulations, maybe a little admiration from the people around. But instead I was met with whispers, laughter, and the cold, cruel gaze of her, the woman who had been trying to steal my life, my husband, and my happiness. Within seconds, the entire room fell silent, not because of me, but because of her boldness, the audacity of someone who thought she could humiliate me in front of everyone. My heart pounded. I could feel the baby move, like a warning, like a reminder that I had to stay strong, and in that moment I realized something very important. I had underestimated the world around me, and more importantly, I had underestimated myself. Before I continue, if you enjoy emotional stories of courage, betrayal, and unexpected triumph, hit that like button and subscribe to Billionaire Heart Tales. We share the most inspiring real-life stories that will move you. It started innocently, or at least I thought so. My husband Daniel had been acting strangely for weeks. He was distracted, distant, and yet charming when he was around me. Everyone said he loved me, but love alone doesn't stop a person from being blind to the reality around them. I had no idea that the woman who had been hovering near him at social events, the one I had politely ignored, would choose the most cruel moment to strike. The Christmas party was lavish. As always, crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, the aroma of roasted turkey and spiced cider filling every corner. Friends and family mingled, unaware that the storm was about to hit. I smiled politely at our guests, my hand on my rounded belly, when suddenly I felt a sharp tug on my sleeve. I turned, and there she was, Emily the mistress everyone whispered about. Her smile was cold, calculated, and cruel. She leaned in close and whispered just loud enough for the nearest guests to hear, "I didn't think you'd show up like this. Do you even realize he doesn't love someone like you?" The words cut deeper than I expected. A shiver ran down my spine, but I straightened my back and looked at her, refusing to let fear take over. I was carrying our child, yes, but I was also a woman who had endured challenges, who had faced betrayal before and survived. And as I stood there, glowing softly under the chandelier lights, I remembered what my mother once told me: true strength is revealed when the world expects you to crumble. I smiled faintly, looking past her, past the whispers and gasps, and focused on the people who truly mattered, my unborn child and myself. Emily wasn't done. She raised her glass, her voice loud enough to reach the far end of the hall. "Everyone, can you believe she actually thinks she belongs here, pregnant and clueless, while the real life, real luxury and charm belongs to me?" Gasps. Some laughter. I could feel the embarrassment prickling through me, but I took a deep breath. My husband froze, caught between her cruelty and my silent dignity, and for the first time, I realized something I hadn't considered before. Daniel had never known the truth about me, about my family, about what I was capable of. He thought he controlled the story, but he had no idea the storm he was about to face. And then it happened. I reached for the microphone, which had been used to toast the guests, and cleared my throat. All eyes turned to me, some curious, some skeptical, most just waiting to see if I'd break. I smiled gently, almost serene, and said, "I've been waiting for the perfect moment to share something very important with everyone here. It seems the universe decided tonight was the right time." Murmurs spread through the room. I continued, my voice steady despite the rapid beating of my heart. "Some of you may not know me fully. Some of you may think you know who I am. But the truth is," I paused, letting the anticipation grow, watching Emily's smug expression falter slightly. "The truth is, I am the daughter of a trillionaire family. Everything you think you know about me, about my life, about who I am, and what I bring into this world is just the surface. And I didn't come here to be humiliated. I came here to celebrate my husband and to protect the love and life we are building together." The room went dead silent. The staff froze mid-step, the waiters paused with their trays, and even Daniel seemed to forget how to breathe. Whispers turned to shocked murmurs. Some people covered their mouths, others blinked in disbelief. Emily's face paled, her confidence wavered. I looked directly at her, letting the weight of the truth sink in. The mistress, the arrogant woman who had laughed at my supposed helplessness now, understood that she had underestimated the very person she sought to humiliate. And as I spoke, I realized the power in my voice, the control I held in revealing the truth. Without anger, without vengeance, simply through the undeniable reality of who I was. "I am not here to fight you," I said, glancing at Daniel, who finally seemed to find his voice. "I am here to celebrate love, family, and the life we are about to bring into this world. And anyone who chooses cruelty over kindness will see that truth sooner or later. And that, dear viewers, was just the beginning." If you are enjoying this story so far, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to Billionaire Heart Tales for more stories like this, because tonight, what happens next will shock everyone, and it will change my life forever. The air in the room was thick with tension, but I could feel the shift. Emily had no idea that this revelation would tip the balance. She thought she controlled the narrative, but she didn't know the secret advantages, the family connections, and the power I had kept hidden. I was more than just a pregnant woman. I was someone who had the intelligence, the courage, and the backing of a family who had always taught me to rise above humiliation. And in that moment I realized that humiliation can be fleeting, but dignity and truth are everlasting. The room was silent after I revealed my secret. Emily's face was pale, her lips slightly trembling as if she couldn't process what I had just said. Guests whispered to each other, glancing between her and me, their eyes wide with disbelief. Daniel stood frozen, a mixture of shock, guilt, and admiration crossing his face. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel the power of that silence, not arrogance, not revenge, just truth, just clarity. But Emily wasn't the type to back down easily. She took a step forward, trying to regain her usual composure. "You think this changes anything?" she hissed, her voice barely audible but venomous. "You might be some secret heiress, but you can't control him. He's mine. He chooses me." Her words were meant to hurt, meant to provoke, but I had already anticipated them. I had lived with people underestimating me my entire life. I had learned to turn their underestimation into my strength. "I don't need to control anyone," I said softly but firmly, letting my voice carry across the room. "Control is an illusion. Respect, honesty, and love, that's what matters. And if you can't understand that, then maybe this party isn't the right place for you." My words were simple, but they carried weight. I could feel the air shift as the guests turned their attention fully to Emily. Some were smiling, subtly, impressed by my composure. Others were whispering, realizing the gravity of what had just unfolded. Daniel finally spoke, stepping slightly closer to me, as if to shield me without saying it. "Emily," he began, his voice low, hesitant. I didn't realize." He stopped, unsure how to continue. And I realized in that moment he had been caught between loyalty to someone he admired and the undeniable truth standing right in front of him. He had never seen this side of me, not the courage, not the intelligence, not the authority I could command when I chose to. I placed a gentle hand on my belly, feeling our unborn child stir, almost as if the baby was acknowledging the drama that surrounded us. It was a strange, grounding moment. I was pregnant, yes, vulnerable in the eyes of the world, but internally I was stronger than I had ever been. Emily could throw her insults, her laughter, her manipulations, but she couldn't touch my dignity or my reality. I was a daughter of wealth, yes, but also of patience, strategy, and resilience. And now, those qualities were about to reveal themselves fully. "I came here to celebrate a family," I continued, turning my gaze back to the crowd, including my friends and family who had been invited. "A family that grows, supports, and protects one another. I won't let anyone, no matter how arrogant or cruel, disrupt that." I could see nods and murmurs of approval. People were realizing that this wasn't just a simple confrontation. It was a woman claiming her space, her power, her future, and her unborn child's future. Emily's arrogance faltered. She clenched her fists, a faint tremor running through her arms. I knew she was calculating, thinking of what to do next. But I wasn't waiting for her to act. I wasn't going to play her game. I smiled gently, almost mockingly, and said, Emily, sometimes the world doesn't work in the way we expect. People think they are in control, but reality has its own plans. And tonight, the reality is simple. You underestimated me. The crowd reacted subtly, shifting closer, listening to every word. Some were impressed, others were shocked, but no one could deny that the balance of power had shifted. Daniel's expression softened, admiration growing in his eyes. I didn't know, he whispered, almost to himself. I didn't know you were capable of this. And that acknowledgement, simple as it was, strengthened me even more. Emily took a step back, visibly shaken. I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. She had planned humiliation, public embarrassment, and control, but none of it worked. I had turned her weapons against her simply by standing tall, speaking truth, and refusing to let fear dominate me. I let silence linger for a few seconds, feeling the energy in the room solidify in my favor. I glanced at the guests again, some whispering excitedly among themselves. I realized that tonight's confrontation wasn't just about me or Daniel. It was about showing everyone present that strength, dignity, and truth could outshine cruelty, manipulation, and deceit. I had learned this long ago from my mother and father, who had raised me to be strong, intelligent, and patient, waiting for the right moment to act. Tonight was that moment. And then, Emily's final move, she tried to strike at my confidence indirectly, speaking to the crowd with forced cheer. Well, I suppose everyone has their secrets, she said, smiling tightly, but some secrets just shock you when revealed. Her words were pointed, meant to stir discomfort, but I ignored the attempt. Instead, I raised my glass slightly and addressed the room. Secrets can be beautiful, I said, my voice calm, resonant, when they reveal the truth, when they protect love and family, and when they show that strength comes from within. Guests nodded, murmuring in agreement, some smiling at me knowingly. Emily's facade was crumbling. She realized that her attempts to control the narrative were failing in real time, and nothing she could do would undo the reality that had been unveiled tonight. Daniel reached out and took my hand gently, the warmth of his touch grounding me. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes said it all. He was impressed, relieved, and, most importantly, proud. I took a deep breath, letting the tension flow out of me. The baby kicked again, a reassuring reminder that I wasn't just fighting for myself tonight. I was fighting for our child, our family, and the future we would build together. Emily could try to humiliate, manipulate, and intimidate, but the truth was on my side. My strength was undeniable, and my dignity was intact. And that realization, that unshakable awareness of my own power, was worth more than any humiliation she could ever attempt. By the end of the night, Emily had retreated quietly to a corner, whispering to herself while the rest of the room watched in stunned silence. I had survived her cruelty. I had revealed my secret in the most powerful way possible, and I had done it all with my head held high, a calm smile, and the knowledge that nothing could shake the truth. The story of that night was just beginning to unfold, and as I later recounted it for Billionaire Heart Tales, I realized how crucial this moment was, not just for me, but for everyone watching. The stakes were high, the humiliation was public, and yet, through courage, truth, and patience, a woman could stand tall and turn what was meant to destroy her into the very moment that defined her strength. The next morning the city felt unusually quiet, as if it too was recovering from the events of the previous night. I woke early, my mind still replaying Emily's smirks, the gasps of the crowd, and Daniel's silent admiration. The baby stirred, reminding me that my fight wasn't just about pride, it was about building a future where our child would grow in a world defined by honesty, respect, and love. I dressed carefully but deliberately, simply, leaving behind the extravagance that had defined my life up until that night. Today wasn't about wealth, it was about clarity, and clarity required humility and courage. Daniel arrived soon after, a quiet determination on his face. He didn't speak much at first, but his presence was comforting. We walked together to the office, each step solidifying the unspoken bond that had begun to form between us under the scrutiny of a room full of witnesses. Emily's attempts to humiliate me had failed, but I knew her resilience as an opponent was equally strong. She would not give up easily, and I needed to prepare not with aggression but with calm intelligence and measured action. When we entered the office, a flurry of messages awaited us. There were whispers from clients, investors, and staff, all referencing last night's scandal. Some were supportive, others curious, and a few subtly critical, as if testing my resolve. Daniel handed me a coffee, and I took a slow sip, savoring the moment of calm before the storm. I realized that Emily's reach extended far beyond that one party. Her influence was subtle, cunning, and dangerous, but I had something she didn't: truth, dignity, and a story backed by reality. The first meeting of the day was with one of our key investors, a man known for his sharp eye and unforgiving standards. He had heard about the confrontation and wanted to understand my position. As I entered the room, I felt a familiar surge of confidence. I addressed him directly, explaining the situation, the facts, and the decisions we had made. I spoke with honesty, clarity, and a calm authority that left no room for misinterpretation. By the end of the conversation, he had not only reassured his support, but had also expressed admiration for the way I had handled what could have been a catastrophic event. Meanwhile, Emily was already at work. I knew her patterns well: subtle attacks in the form of misdirection, gossip, and half-truths designed to destabilize confidence. She sent messages to Daniel's colleagues, attempting to sow seeds of doubt. But every time I received news of her schemes, I remained composed. I had learned over years of navigating complex social dynamics that reacting impulsively only played into an opponent's hands. Instead, I used her energy as motivation, channeling it into planning the next steps, strengthening alliances, and reinforcing the truth of my position. At lunch, Daniel and I discussed the upcoming gala, where Emily planned to further assert her influence. It was a critical event for our social and professional circles, a place where she could humiliate me publicly again if I wasn't prepared. I told him calmly, "We won't fight fire with fire. We'll show our strength through presence, clarity, and truth. The audience will recognize authenticity over theatrics." He nodded, relief washing over his features. He had been trapped in a world of appearances, too often manipulated by those like Emily. For the first time, he seemed to understand the power of genuine strength and patience. Throughout the afternoon, I prepared strategically. I coordinated with event staff, reinforced my networks, and ensured that every detail of the gala would highlight professionalism, dignity, and calm confidence. Meanwhile, Emily continued her games behind the scenes, spreading rumors and whispering false narratives. But each time her attempt to destabilize us reached my ears, I only smiled quietly, knowing that her influence was limited when met with composure and the truth. The baby kicked again, reminding me of why every decision, every step, mattered. It wasn't about revenge, it was about setting an example, establishing a legacy of strength and integrity. I reflected on the past events, understanding how far I had come in mastering control over my emotions and reactions. Emily thrived on chaos and spectacle, but I had learned to turn chaos into clarity and spectacle into a demonstration of unwavering poise. By the late afternoon, the atmosphere had shifted. Key clients and staff who had initially been uncertain began expressing confidence in my leadership. Daniel watched, impressed and relieved. He had been a witness to Emily's attempts to manipulate events for years, but now he was seeing the contrast: one woman driven by cruelty and ego, another by strategy, truth, and measured action. The difference was unmistakable, and it created a subtle yet undeniable momentum in our favor. As evening approached, I reviewed the final plan for the gala. Emily had no idea that I had anticipated her every move. that every whisper, every false story, and every attempt at humiliation had already been accounted for. I felt a calm excitement, knowing that tonight would not only reveal her manipulations but also demonstrate the depth of our strength and unity. By the time we arrived at the gala, the room was abuzz with energy. Guests whispered about last night, curious and excited. Emily tried to maintain her composure, smiling confidently as she entered, but I could see through it the tension in her shoulders, the slight quiver in her hand, the way her eyes searched for a control that was no longer hers to claim. Daniel and I walked together, calm and poised, greeting attendees with warmth and authority. Every step, every interaction subtly reinforced the power of dignity and truth. Throughout the evening, I allowed Emily's attempts at subtle humiliation to unfold. She whispered, gestured, and positioned herself to draw attention. But every action was met with measured responses, calm presence, and a display of authenticity that no wealth, manipulation, or theatrics could match. Guests began noticing, their whispers turning from curiosity to admiration. People were realizing that Emily's cruelty could not compete with genuine strength and unwavering composure. By the end of the night, Emily was visibly deflated. Her whispers had no effect, her gestures went unnoticed, and the guests' attention had shifted entirely. Daniel squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of the victory we had achieved without confrontation, without chaos, simply through presence, preparation, and truth. I smiled softly, knowing that the story was unfolding exactly as it should. Not through anger, not through revenge, but through unwavering strength, clarity, and strategic action. The evening concluded with applause, conversations, and connections strengthened by integrity and truth. Emily, once a figure of dominance and manipulation, had no room to assert power. Daniel and I left the gala side by side, our bond stronger, our position solidified, and our vision for the future clear. I had not only survived her cruelty, but had demonstrated that dignity, patience, and intelligence could triumph over arrogance and deception. As I later shared the events with Billionaire Heart Tales, I reflected on how these moments shaped the story of my life and the lives of those around me. It wasn't just about confronting a mistress or revealing hidden truths. It was about demonstrating the power of presence, the strength of strategy, and the undeniable impact of authenticity. The journey was far from over, but tonight had marked a critical turning point, a moment when the truth, patience, and inner strength began to eclipse cruelty, manipulation, and public spectacle. The gala began with a sense of controlled elegance, the kind that makes every guest aware of the wealth and influence in the room. Yet no one could predict the storm brewing beneath the glittering chandeliers. As I stepped into the grand hall with Daniel at my side, I felt a rush of calm power. Every eye in the room glanced at us, some with curiosity, others with subtle judgment. But I knew that tonight, appearances would not dictate influence, actions would. Emily glided into the room shortly after, perfectly poised, every detail of her dress, hair, and smile meticulously planned. But beneath the surface, tension hummed like a high-strung wire. She needed this to work, needed the crowd to validate her superiority. The first wave of whispers reached me almost immediately. Guests had already caught wind of the previous night's incident, and murmurs of curiosity and scandal floated through the air like a perfume, intoxicating and dangerous. Emily made her move, subtly highlighting my pregnancy, referencing small mistakes from the past, all the while ensuring the conversation seemed casual. Her words dripped with arrogance and cruelty, intended to humiliate, but I responded with nothing more than calm attentiveness, allowing her poison to dissipate harmlessly. Each time she tried to draw attention, I noticed eyes beginning to shift, people sensing the authenticity and composure I carried compared to her calculated theatrics. Daniel squeezed my hand lightly, a quiet anchor in the sea of scrutiny. I could see his respect for me growing visibly, the admiration that had started the previous night now fully established in his expression. He had seen how I controlled my emotions, how I deflected manipulation, and how I spoke with authority without raising my voice. I realized then that the power of presence could be more intimidating than any display of wealth, more effective than any sharp comment or sly insult. Emily, no matter how polished, could not match it. Throughout the night, I engaged with guests, investors, and socialites strategically. Each interaction was designed not only to reinforce credibility, but also to subtly showcase the grace, intellect, and patience I embodied. Emily tried again, whispering rumors and half-truths to high-profile attendees, but each attempt bounced off seamlessly. Her manipulations were transparent to anyone paying attention, and gradually, her influence began to erode. People's curiosity turned into admiration for my composure and strategy as they witnessed firsthand that she thrived on spectacle while I commanded respect through calm, intelligent presence. The pivotal moment came during the speech segment. I had requested to speak, something Emily had anticipated and prepared for. The crowd hushed as I walked to the podium, my voice steady, confident, and clear. I addressed the community directly, and acknowledging the previous night's drama only briefly, then shifting focus to integrity, respect, and the importance of genuine relationships. I highlighted the value of support and understanding over cruelty and manipulation. The room responded with polite applause that grew steadily into admiration. I could see Emily's jaw tighten subtly, the perfect facade cracking under the weight of authenticity. Daniel stood beside me as I spoke, his pride evident. He knew what it had cost to maintain this dignity, to endure the subtle harassment, and to respond with patience instead of anger. I included a gentle acknowledgement of our shared experiences, speaking in a way that highlighted our resilience as a couple. I made sure to convey that strength did not come from wealth or appearances, but from trust, mutual respect, and strategic action. Each word was chosen carefully, designed to turn the audience's perception, to subtly dismantle Emily's influence without engaging in the theatrics she thrived on. As the evening progressed, Emily's attempts to undermine us became increasingly desperate. She tried to draw attention with loud remarks, dramatic gestures, and carefully crafted scenarios meant to embarrass. Yet each time the audience turned toward us, drawn by calm authority, credibility, and authenticity. Daniel and I moved through the room like a well-coordinated team, each interaction reinforcing the truth of our character and the legitimacy of our intentions. Slowly, the balance of power shifted, not through confrontation, but through consistent demonstration of integrity and composure. By the end of the gala, the results were unmistakable. Emily's carefully cultivated influence had crumbled. Whispers of curiosity and admiration had transformed into recognition of her failure to command respect through anything other than spectacle. People now approached Daniel and me with genuine warmth, congratulations, and subtle acknowledgement of the strength we displayed. Emily, once the center of attention, was left to navigate the remnants of her own miscalculation. Her smile remained, but her eyes betrayed frustration and uncertainty. As we left the gala, Daniel's hand firmly holding mine, I reflected on the lessons of the night. It was a moment of vindication, yes, but also of clarity. Power could be wielded without cruelty. Influence could be earned without manipulation, and respect could be commanded through authenticity rather than theatrics. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of complete control, not over others, but over how I responded, how I presented myself, and how I protected the integrity of my life and my family. Back at home, I finally allowed myself a moment of relief. The baby kicked gently, reminding me that all the effort, the planning, the patience, and the endurance had been for something far greater than mere appearances. It had been for the security, dignity, and future of my child. Daniel hugged me tightly, his voice soft, almost in awe. "I knew you could do this," he said. "Not just for yourself, but for all of us." I smiled, understanding that true power lay not in wealth or revenge, but in the ability to endure, to strategize, and to act with unwavering integrity. By the end of the night, as I shared these events with Billionaire Hearttales, I realized that Emily's attempts had unintentionally showcased the strength of patience and authenticity. What could have been a moment of humiliation transformed into an affirmation of courage, strategy, and the power of unwavering composure. The stage was set for the next chapter, one where the consequences of arrogance and cruelty would continue to unfold, and where true character, integrity, and resilience would shine brighter than any social spectacle. The morning light spilled over the city, a quiet contrast to the storm that had defined the past weeks. Emily's whispers, her schemes, her desperate attempts to dominate the narrative, they all came to nothing. Now, every socialite, every investor, every guest who had once listened to her stories of deception now understood the truth. I walked into the office, the baby's movements reminding me that this was no longer about social power, but about building a life of dignity, love, and strength for the family we were creating. Daniel was already there, reviewing plans, his gaze lifting to meet mine with warmth and pride. "They're all seeing it now," he said softly. "Everything we've worked for, the patience, the calm, the truth, it's visible." And it was. The results of measured, intelligent action, of standing strong without retaliation, had begun to ripple across every circle Emily had tried to control. By mid-morning, the final confrontation arrived, not in public, not with grand speeches, but quietly, inevitably. Emily, sensing her influence slipping entirely, attempted a last maneuver to intimidate, to assert some form of power. She came to the office, carrying the same cold, calculated look she had perfected, ready to demand recognition and control. But the room was different now. Her words fell flat, unheeded by those present. The investors, staff, and even Daniel's partners looked at her with polite dismissal, a quiet but undeniable verdict. It was not anger or drama that had undone her. It was competence, calm, and integrity. Each gesture, each measured decision we had made in the past weeks had quietly, persistently built a reality in which her theatrics had no weight. She tried to insert herself, to manipulate the narrative one last time, but it was already too late. Her words were sharp but empty. The power she thought she wielded dissolved in the presence of authenticity and quiet authority. Meanwhile, the baby's gentle kicks reminded me that the stakes were deeply personal, beyond social games or public humiliation. This was about creating a secure life, a foundation of trust and love. Daniel and I worked seamlessly, not needing grand gestures or drama, simply reinforcing a life built on clarity and purpose. And as Emily's presence grew smaller, her desperation clearer, it became apparent that the story she had tried to control, the one she thought defined her, was no longer hers. She had underestimated quiet strength, the power of resilience, and the impact of acting with calm intelligence rather than reactionary anger. Every interaction, every subtle, confident action we had taken now reinforced our position, our control, our dignity. By afternoon, news and social networks carried the ripple effect of the Gala and Emily's failed strategies. Those who had once been swayed by her charm now shared accounts of her attempts and failures, emphasizing my patience, my grace, and my composure under pressure. Articles highlighted my calm approach, my intelligence, and the integrity I maintained, even when publicly challenged. Daniel and I reviewed the coverage, a quiet satisfaction settling over us. It wasn't vengeance that had prevailed, it was the simple, undeniable power of honesty, patience, and determination. Emily's humiliation was not an act of malice on our part. It was a natural consequence of arrogance and cruelty. Evening arrived, and with it a rare, private moment of reflection. Daniel held my hand as I gazed at the skyline, feeling the baby stir inside, a symbol of life, hope, and continuity. The events of the past weeks, the humiliation, the scheming, the confrontation, and the eventual triumph had reinforced something profound. Power is not defined by fear or manipulation, but by patience, integrity, and intelligent action. Emily's attempts to dominate and humiliate had ultimately showcased her own flaws while highlighting the strength we had built together. Our family, our baby, and our unity became the true measure of success. The narrative once threatened was now firmly in our hands, a testament to resilience, strategy, and unwavering dignity. Before the day closed, Daniel and I made a quiet promise to protect our family, to nurture our baby, and to continue building a life rooted in love, respect, and integrity. The past had tested every limit, revealing vulnerabilities and strengths alike, but the future felt secure, guided by clarity, partnership, and the lessons learned from confrontation. Emily's presence faded from our lives, a shadow of what once was, while our path grew brighter, filled with promise, peace, and purpose. And as the night fell, I whispered a quiet affirmation, feeling the baby's gentle kick. We had survived, we had thrived, and no scheme or deception could ever undo the strength, love, and integrity that now defined our family. The story of triumph, resilience, and calm intelligence would continue, a living testament that true power lies not in theatrics, wealth, or manipulation, but in the courage to act with patience, integrity, and unwavering love for what truly matters. Finally, as this chapter concluded, I smiled and reminded myself, and every viewer, that real life is about patience, calm, and integrity. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the power of resilience, share it. Comment below your thoughts, and subscribe to Billionaire Heart Tales for more stories of hope, courage, and triumph against all odds.